More than 200 Venezuelan migrants suspected of being gang members have been deported from the US to a supermax prison in El Salvador. A US federal judge has now ruled that similar deportations under the Alien Enemies Act, which dates back to the 18th century, should be blocked. But according to the White House, the removal from the US had already taken place before that ruling. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke about the move on Sunday in an interview with our US news partners CBS.
We want to get rid of Tren de Aragua gang members. They're terrorists too. The president designated them, asked me to designate, and I did, as a terrorist organization. We want to get rid of them as well. We don't want terrorists in America. I don't know how hard that is to understand. We don't want people in our country that are going to be committing crimes and undermining our national security or the public safety. It's that simple.
Marco Rubio there. Let's speak now to Jorge Perez from BBC Mundo. Good to see you. What do we know about who these migrants or gang members, depending on who you're talking to, who they actually are, Jorge?
Well, these are migrants that has been accused by the authorities in the United States of allegedly being members of the Tren de Aragua. It's a Venezuelan gang organization that was formed in an iconic prison in Venezuela. Then this ban started to spread across the region following many of the flows of Venezuelan migrants. Venezuelan migrants are actually the main target of this organization. Some of them reached the United States and managed to get into the country. And now the U.S. government is not only considering this organization a terrorist organization, but it's also targeting some of its members, deporting them to El Salvador after an agreement they reached with that government. But the questions for some human rights groups is whether the due process was correctly made during this deportation process.
Jorge, why is El Salvador taking them?
Well, El Salvador is the government of President Nayib Bukele, has been launching a campaign of targeting criminals, gang criminals within El Salvador. Then they built this prison known as Cecot. In English, that would mean something like Terrorism Confinement Center. And they have been targeting and arresting and getting into prison some gang members from El Salvador. After this, they reached an agreement with the United States to jail some gang or suspicious gang members arrested in the United States and then deported to El Salvador. The U.S. and El Salvador reached this agreement during a visit of State Secretary Marco Rubio, in which he met Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, and they agreed to do this. El Salvador is expecting to receive from the U.S. government around $6 million a year in order for them to keep these suspected, these alleged criminals within this prison. But this has raised a lot of concern among human rights groups because, again, some doubt of the due process that was carried out during this deportation process to El Salvador.
As we've been speaking to you as well, we have seen some pictures that were released by El Salvador of this supermax prison, where conditions are extraordinary. Can you just explain what function it serves, how many people are there, and what the reports are of life inside the supermax prison?
There's a lot of hermetism regarding this prison and a lot of concern from human groups around the world about what is El Salvador really doing with this prison. Even the Salvadorian government has recognized that some of the people that they have arrested and put into this prison, some of them were innocent, but then they were released according to El Salvador government. This prison is a way in which the Salvadorian government has managed to control violence within this country. For some people within El Salvador, it has been a successful strategy since the criminality and the activity of gang members have actually reduced, and it's one of the main flagships of the Salvadorian government of Nayib Bukele. But on the other hand, there are questions, a lot of questions from human rights groups, whether how's the treatment from the authorities to these people. It is said, for example, that they have to spend 23 hours and 30 minutes a day within a cell with a lot of other people in the same cell. They only have, for example, 30 minutes a day for other activities out of their cells. And the way the government has responded to the violence in the country, but it now seems to be something that has attracted the attention of the U.S. government, trying to find an ally in this region in Latin America, where they can actually deport some of the people they are accusing of being criminals or gang members.
And Jorge, what about the role of Venezuela in this? And this massive gang that's obviously spread from outside Venezuela, if it's found so many of its people now in the US. What do we know about the gang?
The gang is known as Tren de Aragua. Tren de Aragua in English means train of Aragua. And it took the name from a union in the countryside in Venezuela that was building a railroad in the country in the past years. And then they started to function within a prison in Venezuela. These were people that were convicted, were sent to a prison years ago. And then they started to form a gang from that prison. From that prison, they started to operate first, targeting people that was within the prison. So they were basically a gang that was extorting or asking for money within the prison. But then they started to expand their operations to the towns around this prison, and they managed to expand those operations throughout Venezuela. What happened after is that after 2013, Venezuela went through a horrible economic and social crisis, which made millions of Venezuelans to leave the country. There are right now about 8 million Venezuelans living abroad. This gang started to follow the route and the path, the falls of these Venezuelan migrants, and they were targeting the migrants. Then they started to become a sort of multinational, international gang organization operating in countries like Colombia, Chile, Peru. And after all, they even managed to cross to the United States. According to the U.S. authorities, they have got some of the members of these gangs over there.
Oh, great to talk to you. Thanks so much for joining us.